Well, hello. This is my first Arthur interview, besides just reading to you, my YouTube family, if I have a YouTube family. And I have the fabulous Caroline Starr Rose with me. It's my very first interview. I read her book, Miraculous. If you can see that on my phone, because I got the Kindle version this time. I don't read a lot of physical books anymore, so I'm starting to having to actually get the Kindle books so that I can actually read them. But I will get a physical copy of Miraculous just to keep in my Caroline Starr Rose library. And I actually have purchased all of her books, but I loaned out a couple. So maybe it's missing, and over in the wetlands is missing. So, but other than that, yes, I have my Caroline Starr Rose collection, and Caroline is so special to me because in 2012, I believe, she did an article with Adventures in YA Publishing, and when I read her story, I was so inspired that I just could not give up on my writing, no matter how long I had been getting rejected. I read her story and it was inspiring. I said, I just got to keep going. I have to plow to the end of the road like this young woman has done. So she's a lot younger than I am, so I can call her that. But
just a few years, just a few years.
Yeah. So I have a little presentation of Caroline's books, just so the audience will know who she is in case you have not heard of her, which I doubt you should have if you haven't. She is one of the most inspirational children's book writers on the internet. If you have not logged into her website, you need to get there ASAP. So Caroline started with Maybe, which is a novel in verse and is historical fiction. She has written two award-winning historical novels in verse, Maybe being her first, and Bluebirds. And I love both of them. She has also written three fantastic picture books, Over in the Wetlands, Ride On, Will Cody, and did I say that right? Okay. And A Race Around the World. So she's not only prolific, but she's also versatile. And she has written two outstanding historical novels in prose. So she can write in verse and she can write like those of us who just do regular writing, who can't write in verse. So anyway, her latest book is Miraculous, which is here on the screen. And that's what we're going to talk about today. I love this book, and I hope you notice the website on each page. Please go to carolinestarrose.com and just it's a wealth of knowledge for anyone who is already writing or aspiring to write. Just get to that website and subscribe to her newsletter. It's also wonderful. So we're going to be talking today about Miraculous, which is a wonderful, wonderful historical mystery. And I have some questions for Caroline, but if Caroline wants to share some thoughts, go right ahead. If there are any thoughts you'd like to share, feel free.
Well, first I want to say that was the most flattering introduction I've ever had. So thank you very much.
You're welcome.
I
meant every word of it.
The fact that our paths crossed all those years ago, it just is really special to count you as a dear friend. And this is our first face-to-face. Yes. But as we've always said, someday we will meet in person. And I'm just going to put this out there, our secret wish, how we're going to meet in person. We are going to meet at an awards ceremony, because both in a year where we both have books out, because we both will be award winners on this particular future date. So you got to dream as an author, you got to dream.
Yes, yes. Keeping those fingers crossed.
Exactly.
This will be our lucky year. All
This
right,
may
so I
be
have
it.
questions. I have questions for Caroline. And
Yes.
the very first question, whenever I read a great book that has a twisty, fantastic plot, well-defined characters, such vivid imagery, my first thought is, how long did it take to write this? Because for me, I would think it would take me 2, 3, or 4 years. So I always want to know, how long did it take to write Miraculous?
I am a really slow drafter. It's discouraging for me to hear people talk about, oh, this was a 5,000 word day. This was a 10,000 word day. I read recently about someone who wrote 40,000 words in a day. And I thought, that's an entire manuscript. How do you even do that?
Wow.
I'm not fast. I write picture books, I write verse novels. And so to move from a verse novel, which is very spare and just has, small or a limited uh, language, to something that just fills an entire book, it was a real transition for me. But I will say, I looked back through my records, and I every year I have a critique group, and we meet for a fall retreat. And so I started working on this. I had done my research already, which of course I returned to, but I started working on this the fall of 2017. And I think I was 1 or 2 chapters into the book that retreat. And then the following year, I think I sold it in January on proposal with the first few chapters and a synopsis that was nothing like the book ended up being. But my editor believed in me, thank goodness. That next retreat was when I was making the final touches on what I ended up turning in as my first draft. So roughly a year.
Wow.
But I do want to show you something.
Mm-hmm.
So this pile of bound manuscripts, when people ask how many drafts did it take, I never really know how to answer that, because I don't always sequentially work from page 1 to the last page. I might, circle back from the first few chapters and then push forward and then circle back and try to move forward a little more. I might spend weeks stuck in one chapter, which can be so exhausting and difficult. And so it's never this easy to measure system. But I will say that every once in a while, let's be conservative and say every half dozen times through, I might print something up so I have a hard copy to work from that I can mark up. And so we've got 3 of these here, pre first round edits. So once I turned it in, I was still working.
Right.
I was still working for quite some time. And then I've got 2 more once my editor and I were working together. So we did 2 rounds of edits before copy edits, first round, second round. And it's helpful for me when I have no idea to look back at things like this and realize they all start out really murky. They all start out without, they change drastically over the course of time.
Wow. Well, I could tell you put a lot of work into it. I could tell.
Thank you.
A novel like this takes a lot of thought. It's not something that one can sit down and crank out 40,000 words in a week or in a month. It is a novel that you might work on one chapter for a whole week, because there's so many layers and tentacles touching so many different places in a novel, because you have all these varying points of view. And that's one of the questions I want to ask. But before I ask that question about the points of view, Dr. Kingsbury,
yes,
the traveling medicine man, the sinister traveling medicine man. We don't see that a lot in children's literature. We haven't seen a lot in the last few years. We've been seeing a lot of middle school angst, historical novels that touch on some type of activism, but we're not seeing just a straightforward novel about a sinister traveling medicine man, which reminded me of the Music Man, by the way, and I love that.
Have we discussed that?
Yeah.
Because that's actually, I want to say this before you get to your question. So the year that I turned in that first draft for my during my fall retreat, one of our traditions is one night we meet and critique each other's work, and then another night we watch a movie together. And somebody, we had an array of things to choose from, and I said, I haven't seen The Music Man in so many years, and I feel like there's this connection with Dr. Kingsbury. Could we watch that? And so watching, I just thought, oh yes, this is it. The person the outsider who comes to town and is slick and is trying to make a sale.
Yeah. So that was my next question. What inspired you to write this story?
So I attended a talk, I think it was the summer of 2013. My family was on vacation, and part of our trip, we ended up in St. Louis, and we went to a museum there. I have looked for the life of me. I don't remember what the name of this museum was, but it was general history of St. Louis. Then I saw a poster that while we were there in the building, there would be this talk down in the basement about charlatans, quacks, and con men. And I thought, well, that's interesting. So I told my family, I want to take a half hour and go have a listen. You guys, spend time walking around. So I sat through this discussion and thought, this is wild. And I had all these questions bubbled up to the surface. I was thinking, what kind of a person has the nerve to attempt such a sneaky and deceptive approach to life? And then the other side of that was, what kind of a person responds? So it was like, you can't have a charlatan without an audience. And so that's what was really interesting to me. It's almost like a call and response, like you might have in a church service, where it's just the charlatan alone, there's no power in just presenting it. It's that act of performance where you have an actor and an audience that responds. And in asking me this question, Linda, I went back to some of my research and I found the most interesting quote that I want to read to everyone. It says, a charlatan achieves his great power by simply opening a possibility for men to believe what they already want to believe. And so that is really powerful. What are those things that we tell ourselves? If only life were like this, or if I could change that. And then to have somebody come and validate those wishes and those dreams and those concerns and those shortcomings, because charlatans definitely played to what people would perceive as their shortcomings. How would somebody respond? And that was the magic, the combination of the two, this type character and these type characters. And it's like a powder keg. What will happen when they come together?
Wow. Well, you gave Dr. Kingsbury an amazing backstory, and I appreciated that. A long time ago, when I first started writing novels, I read a quote that said, bad people are not just bad people. If you're a writer, you have to give them a reason for doing what they did. And I liked his backstory, and I was surprised by it. That wasn't what I was expecting. So good job there.
Thank you.
My next question is, you wrote this book from so many different points of view, from children, teenagers, adults, the dog.
Even a dog.
Now, I've kind of expected a point of view from the tree.
I know, that would have been good. That would have been good.
But I read somebody else's review who said they were glad there was no point of view from Dr. Kingsbury. So I think we could see him without having his point of view. I think you did a really good job with his backstory. What I wanted to ask you was, first, what made you decide to write from all these different points of view? And did it make the writing go faster or slower?
Okay, good question. I will say that from the start, plot is always, we've discussed this before, plot is elusive. It's not something that comes naturally to me. I do a lot of stumbling around, but I do often start with a sensation, and it's kind of a combination of an emotion plus a physical sensation that I want to convey. And so when I hear like this book has been described as atmospheric, I'm like, yes, I wanted this
definitely.
sensation, this to evoke this feeling inside people. But I knew early on it would be about this charlatan's boy, because I wanted to have, often children's literature is about, well, children in general don't have voices in the world. Now, that can be for big things like, people sometimes take advantage, as happens in this book, or it could be for small things. You don't get to decide if you go to the movie on Friday night because mom's the one with the car and the one who makes the rules. And so I think in children's literature, we give children the opportunity to experience having a voice through watching other children go through things that they probably aren't going to experience in fiction. Sometimes they will. Sometimes we hope they never experience the things they read about. But other times, as Catherine Patterson said, fiction is a dress rehearsal for life. And I love that idea. But I knew early on it was going to be this boy who was kind of in the power, not only as an authority figure under this charlatan, but also enthralled with this man who has supposedly healed his sister. So I knew I wanted that. But I knew that I wanted almost like a Greek chorus response to this man coming to a town, and how, everybody who's been at this medicine show, how did they respond to what they've heard? How, this person in this life situation is going to respond this way. This person in this life situation is going to respond another way. And I will say that first writing retreat, when I had like a chapter and a half and I brought it to the group, and this is the first time I read it, one of my members said, "Oh, Caroline, this is just not going to work with all these points of view, all these voices." And I said, I don't remember exactly what I said, but pretty much, I'm going to prove you wrong, because that's the way this book is going to come. That felt so important. Didn't really know the plot, but that was a driving force, because it was this, like I talked about, this call and answer. I wanted to see from all these people their response. And it was really important to me early on. I did waver on this sometimes, but I'm glad I stuck to it. I did not want to ever hear directly from the doctor. I wanted him to remain mysterious. And because really and truly, it's not his story. Even though he is the central to the story, it's not his story. And it's the story of the people who are in the audience and who respond.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Very good. I'm glad you wrote it, and the different voices, because I don't really see how this entire story could have only been told from Jack's point of view.
I agree. Yeah.
Or from
You would have
Cora's point of
lost a
view.
lot.
Right, right. So it was very nice. It's different. It was refreshing. So I enjoyed the different points of view. And sometimes, we value our critique partners, but we do have to remember that somebody's opinion is just that. It's somebody's opinion. So that means you're going to have readers who are going to say, I don't like all these points of view. That's how I look at the different responses from beta readers and critique partners. That's what my reviews are going to sound like.
I will say that person said, I stand corrected. I'm really glad that you used this approach. So thank you very much.
It was good. It was good. I'm going to ask this one more question, and then we're going to take a break and go to part 2. Now, you could have easily written this as a cast of all white characters, but you chose to put in a Black family. And I'm very appreciative that they were not in an oppressive role. They were not someone's servant or someone's maid or tending to someone else's farm, but they were prosperous. And they were prominent and played a vital role in the community. What made you decide to add diversity, I guess?
I wanted to, so this is the upper Midwestern part of the United States, the area that would have been called the Northwest Territory. So we've got Illinois, Indiana, Ohio, Michigan. I think Wisconsin would have been included in this area. I wasn't exactly sure when I started where we were location-wise, but I knew it was generally in this area. And so I did a bit of reading because I wanted to show what life was really like at that time. And I happened upon a book called The Bone and Sinew of the Land. It was all about Black pioneers. I had no idea that
Me
long
either.
before, yeah, long before the Homestead Act, which I think is 1862. So the Northwest Territory, I think that's 1787. There were these generations back. I mean, that's like 3 generations if you were to look at that time, that window of time. Black homesteaders who came to this part of the United States and were homesteading, farming, owned land, were part of communities. Now, does this mean that every community was perfect and a utopia? No. But, and I wanted to share, your questions, Linda, your questions are so rich. So thank you for getting me to dig back through some of my research and just really think about some of these things. But some of the things I read in this book, I read things like there were several Black men who had been elected to political office in these communities. I mean, in the 1800s, that's amazing. One sentence in particular that I liked, it said, these were not colorblind communities. They knew their history. These communities proved that prejudice is a choice, which I thought was just a really
Wow.
interesting and powerful statement. But specifically, so I wasn't sure what job, I read about various positions African Americans had in their communities, but it wasn't until I took my older boy, who we saw walking back and forth outside the door there.
It's okay.
We were visiting a college in Ohio, actually. I don't know if I even had settled on Ohio at this point. And we flew into Cincinnati and we went to just kind of explore a bit before we went to the school. And so we were at the river right up against Kentucky. And so on the other side of the river, we crossed a bridge and said, well, let's go look over at that mural. So this community was called Covington, Kentucky, which I forgot the name Covington in my book came from this event. And so it was like half a dozen mural panels about the history of this town and the people coming to the community and prominent figures. And here's one whole panel devoted to an African American man who was a preacher, a community leader, and a lumberman. And I thought, that's a key. I mean, talk about a backbone figure in a community. You are literally providing to build for your community to build. So I thought that is where I would like Mr. Kennedy to land. And he's also this community leader, being a member of what do I call it? The city council, or I think that's the term. He's a councilman, I think is the term that I use. And so I just really liked this idea that he could have, in reflective of this part of the world at this time, what I learned from this book, he had this prominent role in his community, and it just felt really right.
Excellent. I enjoyed that. We are going to take a break.
Okay.
And then we're going to come back. Tune in for part 2 of my interview with the illustrious Caroline Starr Rose.